Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to tackle a really interesting question that sits right at the corner of fitness, biology, and all those supplements we see online.
Welcome to the Lenny and Maria Sanchez NotebookLMvideos.com overview show.
You know, we're all looking for that secret weapon, right? That little hack that helps us recover faster from our workouts and come back even stronger. Well, there's been a lot of buzz lately around this thing called hydrogen-rich water. The whole idea is that you could, supercharge your recovery just by drinking a different kind of water. It sounds amazing, almost a little too good to be true. So, what's the real story here?
All right, so how do we actually figure out if this stuff works? Well, we've got to look at the science. And lucky for us, a recent 6-week study did just that. Researchers wanted to put this whole idea to the test with a group of sedentary adults to see if hydrogen-rich water really moves the needle.
So here's the game plan for the study. It was actually pretty straightforward. They took 27 adults, all over 50, who weren't regularly exercising and got them started on a resistance training program. Then they split them into 2 groups. Group 1 drank a liter of the special hydrogen-rich water every day, and Group 2, they just drank a liter of plain old regular water. The goal was simple. Let's see if there's any real difference in their recovery or their quality of life.
So, 6 weeks go by. Everyone's been lifting, everyone's been drinking their assigned water. So, what did they find? Well, this is where things get really interesting because the results were definitely not what you might expect.
Okay, so check this out. On the one hand, for a lot of the big stuff, like actual strength gains, sleep quality, blood lipids, the hydrogen water did nothing. No difference. But, and this is a big but, it did do something very specific. It stopped the usual post-workout spike in 2 things called creatine kinase and myoglobin. Now, these are basically just markers that tell us how much muscle damage has occurred.
So what the heck is creatine kinase, or CK for short? Well, think of it this way. When you work out hard, you create tiny little tears in your muscle fibers. That's totally normal. When that happens, this enzyme, CK, kind of leaks out of the muscle cells and into your bloodstream. So doctors can measure CK levels to see how much muscle damage you've got. The fact that the hydrogen water group had lower levels, it's a pretty good sign they had less muscle damage from their workouts.
Okay, let's just connect the dots here. Less muscle damage, that's a good thing, right? I mean, that's an obvious win. It should mean faster recovery, you're less sore, and you get better results in the long run. It just makes perfect sense. Or does it? This is where the whole story takes a fascinating twist.
And this is where the author of our source material throws a massive curveball. They introduced this idea, a kind of recovery paradox, which completely challenges that simple, intuitive idea that less damage is always, always better.
This slide just lays it all out. On one side, you've got the common assumption. Less damage means better gains. Easy. But the author's analysis completely flips that script. The argument is that by reducing that initial muscle damage, you might actually be turning down the volume on the very signal your body needs to kickstart the whole muscle growth process. Now, I know this probably sounds totally backwards. Why would you want damage? But it all comes down to the fundamental science of how our bodies work. That little bit of soreness and stress after a workout, it's not just an annoying side effect. It's a critical part of the whole process of getting stronger.
And this quote from the source just nails it. The controlled, transient increase in these processes following exercise is a necessary signal for the adaptive response. In other words, that temporary spike in inflammation and stress isn't the enemy. It is the signal. It's a smoke alarm that tells the fire department, your body's repair crew, to come in and rebuild everything bigger and better than before.
Let's break down how this actually works. Think of it as a 4-step cycle. First, you apply stress with your workout. That creates the microdamage. Second, and this is the absolute key, that damage sends a signal. It triggers your body's healing and inflammatory response. That signal leads to step 3, repair, and finally, step 4, adaptation, where your muscles get rebuilt stronger. Now, the big concern here is that this hydrogen water, by being an antioxidant, might be messing with step 2. It could be muffling the signal, and if you do that, you could disrupt the whole chain reaction.
So what does this all mean for you, really?
If this stuff might be quieting the signal for growth, is it just useless? Well, not necessarily. It just means we have to get really specific about what the goal of the workout is.
So, the author lays it out pretty clearly. If you are a strength trainer or anyone whose main goal is muscle hypertrophy, that's the fancy term for building muscle, this is probably not for you. You want that strong signal for adaptation. But what if your goal is different? It could be useful for activities where you're just trying to manage wear and tear. Think about a really long hike, a marathon tennis match, or a century bike ride. In those cases, the goal isn't to stimulate massive muscle growth, it's to protect your body and recover so you can do it again tomorrow.
Okay, now we have to put one final, really important pin in this. A little dose of scientific reality. The researchers themselves pointed out that these findings about muscle damage markers, they were exploratory. What that means in plain English is that it was an interesting side note, not the main event of the study. It's a cool clue that points us in a certain direction, but we'd need a lot more research to be sure about it.
And that kind of leaves us with a much bigger question to chew on, doesn't it? This whole explainer is about hydrogen water, sure, but the theme is so much bigger. In our constant search for comfort, for shortcuts, for faster and easier everything, are we sometimes accidentally removing the very challenges that our bodies and maybe our minds actually need to grow and get stronger? It's definitely something to think about. Thank you for listening to another session of the Lenny and Maria Sanchez Video Overview Show, produced and archived at the website notebooklmvideos.com.